Well, I'm back in nature again. Yeah, I thought I was done with my previous videos, but yeah, no, there's. I think you can never end talking about nature. Although it's probably better that I shouldn't be talking about it, but I'm here. Yeah, so we're in the middle of a heat wave, and these temperatures are great because they remind me of my childhood. Because this is how it felt in '76, which is the famous year. But yeah, I just wanted to top up on previous discussions because one thing that, yeah, I'm no more advanced in this than anyone else, but I've always been interested that the esoteric schools kind of suggest that you need these deep and profound experiences to crack it. And I think maybe it helps, but the mess that we're trying to unpick is there for everybody, Buddha or non-Buddha. Just the Buddha doesn't seek a foundation for it, whereas we're always grasping for something that's true, that will. Sorry, just looking here. Looks like a willow warbler or something picking at the leaves. Yeah, that's the issue really, that people are always looking for a truth, something they can grasp, something they can take home, something they can bash other people over the head with. And the truth is that, yes, the truth is, you can't really say the truth is that there isn't a truth, because that's just another truth. The truth is very fluid and contextual, and the key thing is there's a truth about yourself as well. So you're not grasping the truth. The truth is, if anything, grasping you. So one thing that's always, and I've been over it and over and over it in these videos, but at least intellectually it's clear now. The one thing that is a quagmire in Western philosophy, and if you ever stop to think, a quagmire probably in your own mind, is the issue of where are you? And it's funny because you approach that question with the automatic assumption that you exist. Descartes famously thought he'd found a proof that he existed, but of course he brought that self into the picture because he started with thoughts and then deduced there must be a thinker, and then figured that he must be thinking those thoughts. Again, this is it. It's not wrong, but it's not right either. There's no truth there to grasp. It's much more subtle than that. So the one avenue into the mess, the quagmire, is that I am seeing all this. This is what Daniel Dennett calls the Cartesian theatre. And it's interesting, this idea grew in the West. It was always kind of present. I was interested to discover that St. Augustus argued essentially the same as Descartes. He argued, if I'm mistaken, I am. Point being that the truth of your mistake is separate from making a mistake. And if you make a mistake, that is the truth. You have made a mistake, and you have made a mistake. But he's a long time before Descartes, and he does not conclude, therefore I am. He concludes, therefore there's God. And that's quite an interesting thing, because it shows how Descartes smuggled in a strong self, and that was cultural, or linguistic even, because we have the I am in the language. Anyway, for whatever reasons, this is often the bedrock we're looking for. We're looking to shore up a self and build everything on top of that. But of course, that self must be built on something. So for Descartes, that self was the thinker. And then he had a thinker as the I am, which he built everything else. or a doubter. But this constant pattern of seeking a foundation. So anyway, let me just get into the quagmire. So I am seeing all this. So it's like this is all a film. It is literally, because I'm filming it. So whoever watches this video, they're literally seeing a film. But as I've said in many other videos, right now, this is not a film. This is me actually standing here with it all happening. But nevertheless, I can view it as a film. My neurons are firing, all this stuff's going on. And all that's coming down a sort of neuron tube. And at the very end of it is the observer, me, sitting here going, I can see that, I can see this, I can see the other. And proof of that, as I said in some of the other videos, is here I am. I can see myself. There's the world, and here I am. And I am seeing the world. But of course, I've already added a layer, because what am I actually seeing? I'm seeing that. And for that to be there, it's already been seen. So I made that point many times before, that the seeing has already happened over here. But in order to smuggle the self in, I can't do that. So I have that as kind of an objective reality, and I have whatever's in my head as kind of my subjective reality, which is a mirror in some way of that. And then I've got a little person sitting in a chair in there looking at my subjective film. And all that construction is there in order for me to inject this self sitting in there. So Descartes' right about one thing, that actually the self, if there is such a thing, is seeing what it's seeing, which is all this. Which throws the whole idea of the of where I am completely open, because yeah, if I'm no longer sitting inside my head, where am I? Well, we're beginning to unpick things. But one thing always persists, the sort of many minds problem, that however you unwrap this is what I'm seeing. Whether it's that, whether this tree is here because I've seen it, and all this in a sort of matrix way is part of the matrix of vision, and the self is creating all of this, which is true, it is. Well, the self is wrapped up in all of this, if we want to introduce the self. That is much closer than the idea that all this is there, and then behind the camera here is some self looking at it, because, you know, that self's got to go through the whole process of seeing again. So how do you explain that? How do you explain the self that's in here? How do you explain how it sees? You can't. It's a dead end. Because the seeing has already happened. It's all this process. But you're still stuck with the problem that this is me seeing it. No one else can see what I'm seeing. So we still have a problem, which is, even if we make all of this around here a visual process, it's my eye that's seeing all this, my brain that's manufacturing this three-dimensional space and this vision, but it's mine. So I still got the me thing going on. Well, at least I was stuck with this. I have been stuck with this for most of my life. And so we suggest that other people, when they come here, have a similar thing. They've got their matrix and their three-dimensional world being created inside their brain as a virtual reality. And so every brain has got a virtual reality in it. And then all these virtual realities are somehow in some other objective reality, but you can't see each other's virtual reality. You can only see the trees. So that kind of version of things is, there are real trees here which you can measure with instruments, and then the light comes off those trees, goes into brains and creates virtual realities, and then there's a virtual reality for every brain. But then when those brains come to think about themselves, they then have multiple ideas about virtual realities in them, ad infinitum. It's a mess. So what the Yogacara school do is they point out that this mess, this proliferation of people my three-dimensional space, your three-dimensional space, the next person's three-dimensional space. This proliferation of three-dimensional spaces is still trying to settle everything on a self. I'm still taking myself as fundamental, smuggling it in, but in a much more sophisticated way now, which is what I was doing in the last video. I mean, well, it doesn't matter. But in the last video, I was squeezing the idea of the self being in here. All those videos with the bluebells. I was just pressuring that idea that the self is locked in here. And replacing it with an identical idea, really, that the self is engaged in the manufacture of this, which is much closer to some of the Hindu conceptions in the Upanishads, that because they have the Atman. So the Hindu never does away with the self, but it expands the self away from the narrow egotistical self towards a more cosmic self. But the Atman and the Brahman are still entities in Hinduism. In Buddhism, very importantly, it goes a stage further, where even the grasping to a cosmic self or a universal self is still a self. And it may be like in the Bhagavad Gita and Vishnu's many forms vision to, I've forgotten his name for a second, he's the great hero, Arjun. Paragraph 101, maybe? Verse 101. So he shows Arjun that God is present in every entity and is also all the entities together. So this idea that the many and the one are themselves constructs of a more fundamental reality, which goes beyond the many, goes beyond the one. Yes, this is all of this always is still trying to ground on something, no matter how sophisticated it gets. It's still trying to ground on something even intangible. It's still something to try and grasp. And there are experiences associated with these things, so it's not just abstract philosophy. You can have your Arjun back of the chariot experience of Vishnu, darshan of the unity of the many and the one. Or you cannot. This is why I wonder sometimes. Traditionally, you go and sit in a cave and meditate for a lifetime and have some experiences, and these constitute your enlightenment. But this is still the idea of there being a grounding, a fundamental truth, an esoteric group of people who have either accessed it or not accessed it. And it's still all of it manufacturing this idea of a grounding, a fundamental truth. And as I understand it, the whole idea is the opposite of that. So the Heart Sutra says, not even any path. No eye, no nose, no mind, no objects of consciousness. If you solidify any of these into any fixed entity, you've just created a new falsehood, or a new straitjacket for the world that is probably true for a bit, but it'll outlive its usefulness. I mean, this is the self. Someone said to me something brilliant recently, that when there's pain, there's self. Because, much as I don't like to say it, self is kind of connected to survival. And there's no better way to want to survive than to have a sense of self. So we kick in a self when there's fear. How am I going to protect myself? So yeah, there's a use to an Atman, to a self, but then when we're peaceful, we can let it go. And I know someone who's just had that experience, ego dissolution. So fantastic, well done her. But of course, it's a temporary thing, and her ego's reconstructed. And then hopefully, the great pitfall is immediately afterwards, which is when you become that person who's had an ego dissolution, which is the strongest ego. And the most destructive ego. So yeah, this is it. The reason for this video is how how difficult this eel is to catch. But you can't catch it, that's the point. Anyway, right, let's just wind up this last bit. So I've waffled my way through various ways in which we can rehash the self, make it cosmic, make it the bedrock of the 3D matrix world in which I stand. But really importantly, every time injecting some kind of solid self. And this is the crux, because if you let go, or at least if you realize that that self is itself constructed, and I have here a silver wash fritillary butterfly going past. Never going to make it as a wildlife cameraman, mess that up. Very big, powerful. Yeah, those butterflies are big enough that you feel that you're in the presence of a living thing. You're no longer alone. I love that. Oh, here she comes again. Two of them over there. Wow. Yes, I'm a guest in the world of silver washed fritillary. So there are, that's already playing around with ego. That I'm humiliated in the presence of an insect. Yes. Yeah. Or maybe humbled, not humiliated. Sorry, humbled. Yeah. And I'm injecting self into that insect as well. So yeah, all the games we can play with this self thing. But yeah, the critical thing, which solves the whole matrix problem, that's a Spitfire incidentally flying past. So we can imagine we're in 1940, Battle of Britain. Yeah, so the crux of this is that you have this problem that I've still injected a self into all of this, even if I make this into my matrix and the brain is manufacturing this 3D world and the smell space and the auditory space and all the various senses, and it's all sticking it together into this virtual reality, like in a computer. And the computer is me. So I've not really solved anything, as I've just shifted me from being this to being the manufacturer of this, and just pushing me around. However, there is some truth to that, because if we realize that it's all manufactured, and even the idea that it's in the 3D world is manufactured, then we're very close to enlightenment, because what we're doing is we're saying, or maybe I'll just bracket this, because the problem with making these 3D worlds, or suggesting all these are mental processes, is that we, and I've said it before, but I didn't take the jump, I didn't take the leap off from the point. We have multiple minds, all having our 3D spaces in our brains, and those all represent in some way the material reality. So we're not doing away with the trees and the undergrowth and the fritillaries. We're not doing away with them, but what we're doing is we're saying that they're real ones, and then those real ones, through a process of light and neural activity and stuff, they create this conscious image, and everybody has a different conscious image. So even if there was someone standing with me right now, they would have a different perspective. They would see, someone standing over here would see a very slightly different thing from someone standing over here. Maybe someone lying on the ground would see that. So just by virtue of us having different eyes on the scene, we would all have a different reality. And I've been through that, because there's kind of a stack of things. So you don't see the process, because what you're seeing is the process. So as I've been through many times before in the Bluebell ones, you can look at somebody else seeing, and you can see the gap between their eye and the object they're looking at. And you can measure their brain, put electrodes in, do whatever you want to do, and you can observe the processes at work, but you're looking at the processes. For the person who's looking, those processes are the looking. So same with the camera. So even looking at this video, there's a process of real trunk, light bouncing off it, going into the camera, which is, where is it? Here. And then going onto the computer disk, or the phone disk, and then going onto the computer disk, and then with a screen, LCD screen, being converted back into light and going back into the eye. You know, there's a process, and that process is a stack. So there's not a whole series of stages. All the stages stack together to create a conscious image. So yourself, if there is such a thing, is that stack. But we're still constructing a self, and we've also now separated. I know, so I'm repeating myself a lot, but we've now I've said this all before, but I'm saying it again. We've separated what we're now calling the real trunk that lots of people can see, just one trunk which lots of people can see, from the many images in the retinas and the many brain activities that may be present for many brains standing around here. And then, still stuck a little bit in the Cartesian theatre, we're suggesting that all that creates this 3D matrix-like reality. And we've not really changed our model, because we're still having a physical thing here and a mental thing here. So, yeah, what the Yogacara school is doing is they're saying that really what I've just explained is still injecting a self. Doesn't matter where you put it, whether you put it in the manufacture of the seeing world, whether you put it in a Cartesian position at the center looking out, whether you have a unity of one and many, however you do it, you're still manufacturing something which you're going to call important, primary, truthful. But that's the point, it's being manufactured and you're injecting it. So what the Yogacara school is saying is everything that's happening, every thought, every piece of activity, everything that's seen is being manufactured. And even when you try and understand that, it's still being manufactured. And when you inject a self, it's still being manufactured. So that idea that there's a true world out there and that light is bouncing off there and going into my eye and creating activities in my brain is a valid model, but it's being created. It doesn't have any more importance than anything else. It is still a manufactured model, but it's a process, and it's going on. It doesn't have truth behind it, not truth in an absolute sense. So you can't go, I now understand how it all works, and then I'm going to step outside my 3D world because I understand that this is all an illusion. This is all manufactured by the brain, and I'm going to get outside this, and I'm going to see the world for what it truly is, because every cog in that way of thinking is itself manufactured. The idea of there being an outside is a manufactured thought, which you could say was on the inside, but inside of what? There is no inside and outside. There's no manufactured reality versus the cause or the true objective reality. These all themselves ideas that are part of the manufacture. And if you look at why that jars with most ways of thinking, it jars because we are habitually sticking a self in somewhere. All the problem begins because we're sticking a self in. However you think about the world, you always end up, me, and I imagine most people, however you think about all of this, at any level, whether it's just a walk in the park or a deep spiritual inquiry, even with the butterfly going past, I'm injecting self into the butterfly, self into me. I'm a pagan, I inject self into the trees. one way or the other, we're going to inject some kind of self, some bedrock, some source, some origin, some truth into this. God, the classic. And it's wrong to say that's wrong. The point is, it's just manufactured. That's the thing to observe, is that it's no greater achievement to do this than anything else. So you've got the atheist walking along here going, there's no God. This is all evolution, and, well, great. If you analyse what that atheist is doing, they're just manufacturing ideas. And they won't be any different from anyone else, because they will most likely be manufacturing ideas around a self. They'll be going, I'm looking at this, these are my ideas, I've come up with this, I've come up with that, I've done this, I've done that. And they'll be hanging it all on the coat hanger of a self somewhere. So the moment of enlightenment, or at least I think there are many ways, but for the Yogacara, as I understand it, the key thing that's to push against is the idea that there is any bedrock truth. And that one thing's more truth than the other. And that this is happening for me, and this is mine, and it's my experience, my voice, my thoughts, my exposition of my understanding of Yogacara. If you're really honest, it's all just happening. And you can inject a self if you like. That is one thing we do. Or you cannot. And the same watching this. True, it's useful. Here comes the silver artillery again. Now, in a moment like that, if you watch it really closely, your attention can be drawn. I think the Greeks call it ecstasis. You get a small moment of ecstasis where you leave yourself because you're transfixed or mesmerized by something else for a moment, and there aren't the thoughts about, oh look, I've seen a fritillary. Now I may think, oh good, I've seen a silver washed fritillary, make a note of that. But this is being manufactured afterwards, injected. To actually see that fritillary, you don't need to be there. Which is what I was saying before about there's no self in nature. You inject the self, it's a manufactured process, just like everything else. And even that language is wrong, because I'm saying you inject it. It is being injected. And once it's injected, then there's a self there. And that self can do all kinds of things. Like it can be the reason why it got injected, which is clearly circular. And that's why you need to meditate, because you can't, I don't think you can think your way any further. Because the chances are, when you think about it, you're doing it from a perspective of a self already. And you can't found non-self on self. You can't go, I am going to enlighten. I'm going to unpick this mess. I am going to get out of this box of self. This box of I am seeing. I have seen a silver wash fritillary. I am going to tell everyone about it. I'm going to upload it onto the net. That is all built already on an injected self. A manufactured process that you didn't do. You don't manufacture the self, because the presence of the self is the result of the manufacture. So when I go, I'm standing in a wood, I've already injected the self. I haven't injected it. I keep using that word. I mean, that's just the way English works. But you can stand here, oblivious to yourself, listening to things, and then I'll suddenly crash in, become self-conscious. Like I'm late, I've got to get home. That crashing in of the self It's clearly, oh wow, that's an impressive southern hawker dragonfly. Right, actually, I do need to go, unfortunately. I could stand here all day. And it's not a sudden either or. It's a very gradual thing. There's a little bit of self floating around. Something bites you, and you're like, oh, there's the pain. Then there's the whole build up of, I mean, it can be minor. It can get really quite serious. You can get really annoyed. You can feel that your day's been spoiled because you got a bite. You know, whose day's been spoiled? To get that thought, you've got to inject a self. But we're so habituated to it, and we often think from that platform of self. So we just get used to building everything on this platform of self. But that whole platform is not shored up on anything, and it comes and goes during the course of the day, constantly varying. But when we come to think about it and narrativize it, we always do it from, or nearly always do it from the perspective of self. So even if we've had a lovely walk in the park and we go home and sit down and think about it, we will very likely narrativize it as a self, because that's what a story is, isn't it? You've got a hero, got a person in there. So when you think back over what you've done, you always stick a self in. What you should possibly remember when you're thinking back over things is who is doing the thinking. You're busy thinking, I did this, I did that. Well, while you're busy thinking who did this and who did that, while you're busy thinking I did this, I did that, who is doing that thinking? So already you've got two selves, and one that you're paying attention to and one you're not. So it's a mess, it really is. But the way out of the mess is to just recognize that it's all going on. And even when you think bits of it are yours, that is part of the stuff that's going on. With our brains, if we're going to call them that, our brains make multiple characters. You know, we can be the good guy, we can discover something new about ourselves, like we did something and we can think I'm the bad guy. People can like us and we think we're the hero. People can not like us and we wonder, do I know myself? I thought I was likable, why does that person not like me? And it's like a story, we're just creating selves, constantly creating these selves. On the belief that one of them's true, and on the belief that I am creating them even. But if we look at it, and this is the letting go, the core letting go, is that all the injections of self, if we look at them, are just manufactured like everything else. Which then leaves us with the unthinkable possibility that this is all there is. And I use the word all kind of irrelevantly, because even if you think this is all there is, what are you comparing it to? What's outside? And if there was an outside, who's going to go there? Because even being inside can only happen once you've injected a self inside. So we kind of create a narrative of me, and we pop it in the middle of this 3D world, an avatar. And then once he's popped into the middle of the 3D world, he can then go, oh look, I've dropped in to reality. Let me drop out again. Well, in actual fact, he didn't drop into reality. He became created along with reality. He has no primary existence. He's just manufactured as these trees. Which sounds crazy, doesn't it? Because surely I'm seeing the trees. So how can I be no more real than they are? Yeah, that's it really, isn't it? When I say that I'm seeing these trees, that I'm giving priority to as the person who needs to be here for them to be seen, that I is manufactured alongside the trees in order to explain how they came to be seen. And I'm just chipping away at the thing. I'm not enlightened, but you can see that. Keep chipping on that. That's what ultimately lets it go. Right, I've got to go now, but it's been a pleasure. And this is a beautiful spot. I don't mind spending all day here. Here comes the silver washed tree again. Quite jealous of them. This is where they get to spend all their time. Right, signing off.